You never responded to me.
Yeah.
I know, that's responding when I do not, I never tried. I did assign myself to your phone.
The Open Meetings Act is posted on the wall. Roll call.
Holly.
Here.
Buckminster. Rod.
Here.
Wisdom. Here. Ferguson.
Here.
Ratcliffe.
Here.
Foraker. Here. Layden.
Here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The only thing I got on the mayor's report is I'd like to thank the street crew for a good job they did on snow removal. I've had a lot of, not a lot, but quite a few calls on that. Thank you. City administrator?
Just a couple things, reminders. We had the office, City Hall side closed down the next 3 days with our conversion. So the staff's going through all the utility billing pieces. We can't take any payments in this time frame, so we just shut that component down. We'll fire back up Monday. We can actually start taking payments, and then they'll be running through the cycles and actually doing all the next week. We'll take payments, but they still have a bunch of work they have to do. Essentially, they go through one by one accounts, all 2,300 utility accounts, and make sure everything matches in our system between the old system and the new system. So you see notices out for that. That's why that is. Anything else?
Chief? Under the consent agenda, we have minutes approved for January 2nd, agenda approval, claims approved for December 16th through January 12th, and the consent agenda.
Motion to approve. Second.
I vote.
7 yeas.
There's no old business, so we'll move on to regular business discussion. Review of the Fall City Recreation Wellness Center Study, APMA Olson.
Jay, you want to come up and talk through? I got that up here somewhere.
Glad to be here. Glad to be back. Jake Palu, Alley Pointer McKenna Architecture. We worked in partnership with Olson and Associates. Olson. I'm the flying solo tonight, so I'll try and answer everything I can. And if there are things that are beyond my scope in this study, I'll get back to you shortly. Anthony, we talked about an overview. How long would you like me to?
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it
We're at
takes.
your mercy.
Well, anticipating that some of our time might be best spent on answering your questions since you've had this for a little while to review it. I can kind of make a couple of general comments, and then if you'd like me to go through it, I can in more detail, but I'll probably defer to questions. So we started the process months ago when we did some general evaluation and what we call discovery phase, where we got to know a little bit about your community, a lot of conversation with Anthony, and then we did those individual sessions. And during those sessions, a lot of topics came up. We documented as best we could. We did some polling in the meetings where we actually allowed participants to sort of state not only their verbal interest, but also to vote on a screen. That makes it a little more collaborative. We held those online as well for those that couldn't make it in person. We documented that. So the first section of the report before you goes over some standards for what we learned that you already know, sites, locations, some statistics about Fall City. And then we show you all of the data that we kind of gathered. Anytime we do these studies, I'd like to remind council members and the community that reads this, it's a snapshot. It's a series of opinions on something that's very hard to gauge. This is a roadmap in the sense that it sets a direction, but it doesn't tell you the exact final destination. But we got some good information. We talked about different types of facilities. We toured a few facilities. We brought photos of some that we've designed. We referred to some that others have designed and benchmarked. We talked about attributes that we thought rec center environment could use. And then we took that information after a couple of work sessions on our team and started looking at opportunities. Obviously, you no, we can build new, we can build anything new you'd like. But it became very interesting to discover or to discuss the opportunities that two existing buildings have. Anything that we can fit in an existing building, obviously you have an option to build new. So don't think that we're pushing you in one direction, but it became evident through the study and through the conversations that perhaps a reuse of Pritchard Auditorium as the home base for your rec center would be worth evaluating. We did so in a test fit and a cost estimate. We also looked at the Armory building. Armory building would be what could it be used for? How could it supplement rec? Or how could it provide an alternative space for meetings, assembly space, which is currently what part of Pritchard does. So as you look through the report, you'll see two options that describe the Armory becoming a community activity space, where you could have rental events, community events, a couple of different ways to break it up. We laid out the test fit for the Armory with the idea that perhaps historic tax credits might be something that you're interested in doing. So we tried to respect the rules the Park Service governs, the National Park Service, of how you take advantage of historic tax credits. To give you that option, if you choose not to take part in that program, obviously you can still renovate it in light and follow the test fits that we provided. We did a structural evaluation of that building. Olson completed that with a structural engineer. There are some things that need to be fixed, but for buildings of its age, it's in good shape. I'll also add, it was a time of construction where things are done really durable. So it was our intent to respect the bearing walls that are there because they're solid. It was our intent to sort of highlight the structural elements that are there because they're beautiful. Could be polished to be made beautiful. When we get to Pritchard has some structural limitations. Obviously, you all have been in a lot more than I have, but the fixed seating, and I'll call it the structure that the seats sit on, is concrete, cast in place. Very difficult to work around. So we propose an alternative to remove it and keep the outside shell of the building looking the same, preserve those foundations and stone that you already have in structure, and then put a new building, so to speak, within it, inhabiting around the structure. So the test fit that we put together sort of highlights what that could be. It's more space than we initial programmed, but when you're taking an existing building and putting new program in it, you're going to have some inefficiencies. So if you look through this program, you'll see a number of spaces that we think could be a part of it, including some indoor aquatics, a second floor running track, a couple of volleyball courts that would overlay one basketball, or you see a number of smaller basketball sort of practice areas. We have space for group exercise on the stage, and then a number of supporting spaces within it. We think that this could be, with additional study, online with some of the venues that you said that you like and some that we visited, and be a long-term solution for recreation in Falls City. There's a lot of unknowns with the rec study of this scale and scope. So the cost estimation process was done by a third party, building cost consultants. They are a Nebraska-based company. They work around the country, though. And we've worked with them for more than 15 years. And they take a study and the test fits and then their experience with us and do as much detail as they can, filling in a lot of missing components. So this is an opinion of probable costs. It includes some escalation for what construction could be, but it's really meant to be the beginning of a guidepost. So anytime a community kind of takes a conceptual study, an early evaluation, know that this is, again, a target for where we think it could be, but there are a number of decisions you can make in the process that could make that number go up or make that number go down. So I think it's a feasibility study that shows you two options. If during your deliberations in the next phase, you decide that renovations have too many unknowns and you'd like to do new construction, all of the programming that we put into this document, in other words, the prioritization, is still valid. And you just apply that to a new building, and we could resize some of the projected costs to make that happen. We really didn't want to make it prescriptive. You have lots of routes here. But I do think that, my opinion, listening to all the public sessions and kind of studying the two buildings, it did come across that it seems a very good use of resources to try and reuse these two existing buildings. So that kind of rang true to me, not only as an architect, but also as a steward of our resources and as a taxpayer, that if you have an asset that's underutilized, you can invest in it again. That seems to make some sense. I guess with that, that's kind of my high level overview. I skipped through about 50 pages there, about 3 minutes. But I'd love to take some questions if you have them.
Comment, this is very well done. This is real good. I
Appreciate it.
this, yeah, it's very thorough and a lot of pages, but it's fun to go through and see what you guys came up with and all the ideas that, everybody that you reached out and became a part of your studies, and it's good. It's really, really good. It's sort of exciting to look at through all this and everything that you looked at between the basketball courts and taking down this blue. When I first read that, I thought, what?
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it, like, wow, what a lot of use of space, and it's been a long time since we've pumped a lot of money. It's been over 30 years that we've done anything, and it's sort of a space that's not used enough, and this really makes a usable space in the future. And I like the idea of renovating, and I think it's great for the community. That's very well done, though. I like all the ideas, what you did on some of your other projects, and throwing that out there and giving us an idea of what the colorized look would be and everything. Thank you very much for this. That's really good.
The last remodel, actually, at Pritchard, when they did that remodel, APMA designed. So they understand the building pretty well. Now, like Jay alluded to earlier, this is conceptual, this is not set in stone as far as a design. Essentially, the governing body would need to go into the next phase if this is something we wanted to chase down. Essentially, which Ivan, kind of the next item is looking at the steering committees of what you want to do. If you did this, you lose how Pritchard's being operated now. Do you supplement that also? Do you not? You just kill that. That's stuff that we would need to look at, and I guess we need a probably committee to get through those components. What they got with now is the data came out of the study to say here, potentially use this space. The ones we went and looked at, like we're talking those were, Woodbine was like 40,000 square foot facility.
So
I think around there, pretty much get all the amenities like those entities have, potentially within our framework that we have. Whereas a new build's gonna be 450, 500 bucks a square foot, compared to a remodel and maybe 350, 400, So you guys look through the kind of design stuff. They talked about the base kind of floor, and then you see the second level. Sometimes it's hard to look. Essentially, they built in to say that seating comes out, and there's a full second level in that building at that point in time, with an elevator to get up there and a walking track to go around. So if you're reading through that or looking through that, that's what this page kind of depicted, was that second level with essentially flex space to do what you want with programming based upon what comes out of the studies and what the citizens would really want to get done. So the other piece they talked about was that Armory building, potentially looking at it as an event center or an event space, utilize it in full rather than sitting there doing nothing. You could still potentially do events at Pritchard with a remodel. It's just going to be a little bit different with how you'd structure, if you had a membership or an annual membership for citizens, how that would be limited for them space-wise. But the square footage would accommodate most of all the events that we have in Pritchard now. Just some data on Pritchard. I went through last year. It's about 25% used. We had 93 full days of events in there that are either weddings, full or half days, funerals, just the businesses or craft fairs like Amber puts on. Election uses it, Bloodmobile. That's kind of the basic use, but essentially about 93 days out of the year, besides what is being done hourly there, which is schools. Sacred Heart still does some practices there. They had a total of 97 hours rented for practices, and then we had another 84 hours of private sports in there that's rented out hourly. And then we have community basketball, which was open for about 60 hours on the year. So, just gives you kind of an idea of what we're doing down there. Doesn't generate that much income. You know, last year it generated about $19,000 of income and $110,000 of expenses. So, you end up putting up a new facility somewhere, considering you're still gonna have those expenses sitting there and stacking additional on somewhere else. So you potentially would have some savings going into the existing facility, with limitations of use then.
You know, like how many of those events use the stands, you think? I'm thinking like,
The stage?
no, I mean like the seating. If we take the seating out, a lot of these events could still happen there. I would say maybe a handful really use the seating
Graduation and the
School.
JC's wrestling,
Yeah.
that's
in the music.
about,
musicals.
Yeah.
The problem with the weddings is you can't close the facility down if someone's paying to use it, so that's the reason the second building was the old armory or the old city hall.
And we wouldn't necessarily have to do the armory, like part of me thinks that's something more the private market could make a event space for. I just think about like all my friends going nuts with their kids at home right now. This would be a great facility. We toured a lot of facilities that have like indoor play areas, places to take your kids to burn off some steam. Any strategic planning we've ever had, whether I've been a part of Chamber or Edge or whoever, that's a lot of the things they talk about is more things for our kids to do, you know? And this would have so many different spaces that we could use for so many different things. You know, the possibilities are pretty much endless, so.
And with the renovation and the kitchens, and everything, I'm dating myself, but at sometimes, there has been times, Pritchard Auditorium years ago was used as an emergency place. And with, you know, now with all this extra space and multiple rooms where you can separate people, and then, you know, we had a big fire at the south end of town, and everything south of 14th had to go somewhere. It was Pritchard Auditorium. Fortunately, that hasn't happened again, but you gotta think about that too. Or if there is some natural disaster, any kind of disaster, where everybody can go to, and something like this, you'd have, yeah, it's a big need for it.
If we end up getting rid of the senior citizen center for one reason or another, this could encompass a lot of those activities. Would still have a kitchen if we ever needed to do Meals on Wheels out of there. I mean, it's just such a big space once you take out those seating, and it's just mind blowing what all you can fit in there to do, yeah.
This would be a big attractant for a community. Factories want to come to town, they're going to look at something like this and say, I can get people to come here and have a good quality of life. It really
Yeah,
will.
you always hear the negative feedback, well, there's nothing to do in Falls City, or we gotta, you know, attract the young families, and this would really help. I think that we toured one facility in Iowa, and it was a much smaller community than ours, and it was just such an attraction, they said, for all of the surrounding smaller communities, than to come there, and it really put us as a hub again for the county and tri-state area, really. I think a lot of people would drive to use facilities like this.
I think the timing of this week is one of those things where
Right.
we're all looking for about 4 months of what do we do when our outdoor facilities are really
Yeah.
difficult to use.
Yeah, we have great sports programming in the summers and the pool, the ball fields, but it's, yeah, the other 9 months a year when Nebraska weather's not always ideal, what do we have for the kids, to do, and adults for that matter?
We, the programming did produce some spaces that were labeled flex, or we had 4 group exercise, and that's what just says group X. And if you can think of a group X space, it could be you could hold a CPR session at it, you could hold a dance class, you could bring in tables and do art class. So they are really flexible spaces. I would add that if there are other things during the next phase that you determine are useful to put into this, it could be studied fairly quickly. You mentioned senior center uses. There's space for some offices. And I think we did see some unique examples where there were some private businesses that leased space within them, and that was the one in Woodbine where there was a private therapist group that was paying rent to be within that. So when you have a building with a little bit of flexibility, I think there could be some interesting partnerships that would maybe help offset some of those costs. Because operating a building that size every day will up the cost for operation. It's a good thing to have people in from 6 a.m. to 10 o'clock at night, but it will produce additional energy use, janitorial costs. And maybe there's some ways to get creative about that. I think that's one of those trends we're seeing in a lot of places of partnerships where you identify others that want to use it, and then you provide, as a city entity, you can provide the big building, because that's your carry, but then you can have others help you along the way.
I think it's doable for a town of our size. Like Hiawatha has a separate paid position for Parks and Rec. I think it's full-time and a part-time position, so it's not out of the realm for us to be able to budget that somehow.
We have seen some staffing. We worked with the city of Papillion years ago, and their public recreation department offices in it, and going through their planning. There is some nice overlap because, as you all know, summer is a very busy time for a lot of your groups, right? That's when maintenance is busy, that's when rec is busy, that's when your aquatics is flowing. And then that winter time when there's a little bit of downtime, if you have a permanent staff member, that's when all that planning can occur. And if they're officed in this facility, they could also turn the lights on and turn the lights off and take care of some things. So I think there are some models out there that you wouldn't have to invent this. You could go look and make sure the numbers all work, which I know Anthony's always focused on. Good questions.
On the renovation on the, and compared to a new one, would the renovation be as energy efficient? I mean, you got an old structure.
Yeah.
Brick, I mean.
It's a good question. So on new construction, we do have a number of advantages where we can, especially if the options come down to building one slightly larger or being more efficient with space, that's our number way of saving energy. We have a lot of experience with historic construction systems. So on Pritchard, where we wouldn't be utilizing historic tax credits, it would really not be eligible, in my opinion, based on the number of changes we're making. The program's really intended for those that adaptive reuse, but stick to sort of the Park Service guidelines. So it would kind of, removing the seating, for example, would be one of those no-goes in my opinion. In those cases, in that case on Pritchard, we could really use all the new technologies we'd like. Really the budget would be the limit of how efficient we wanted to get with systems. A lot of time with public entities like you all, you're looking at the long haul. So we do spend a little more upfront so that the systems last longer and use a little less energy. When we do these in the private world, we tend to be a little more upfront cost conscious and we spend a little more on energy. So we look at that. On the Armory building, where we're gonna have to follow, if you take advantage of tax credits, the historic guidelines, we do have some limitations. On a historic preservation project, we're gonna fix the few windows you have versus replace them unless they're really unrepairable. And some of those you just can never overcome. So the good news is we have experience with both, and we have with Olson as a partner, we have a really good energy modeling group. And what we tend to do is go through good, better, and best for energy efficiency, for durability, and then give you some options. That's when I say, when you read through the cost estimate, they take a guess at middle of the road. So on some of these things, you're gonna spend more, and on some others, we're gonna say, no, we're not gonna spend that money. And that's why when we reviewed it in depth with Anthony, I sort of said, each one of these line items in this document can be pulled apart, but in general, the overall numbers tend to be about right. Even if you guys have a special interest in energy here and we spend more on that aspect, we'll try and find some other ways to make it offset.
You talked about tax credits. Essentially, they're not eligible here, but the event center component would potentially be.
The Armory.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you flip to the plan, Anthony, so there are some incentives to take a building like this from both the state and federal government, and the state ones are eligible for nonprofits, and there's been some unique ownership opportunities where nonprofit cities can partner with others to take advantage of the credits.
And we can take care of those now as a
Yes.
city entity. Yeah.
Yes, in which case we would follow the National Park Service guidelines on historic preservation. We have lots of experience with that at Alley Pointer. In Omaha and Lincoln, I can point to a number of civic examples where we follow those guidelines. What it means basically is we're writing a narrative. We're proving to the Park Service that the building is historically eligible, which it would be. And then we go through the preservation guidelines where you try and respect the original intent. It allows you to modify it, but when you modify it, we sort of set apart the new from the old. And by that, I mean, if we have to infill a window with new masonry because we need to put mechanical equipment behind it, little subtle details, but we recess the brick an inch so you can see where the old opening was and you can tell the new from the old. So there's some costs involved for masons. Instead of just making it flush, we recess it, but in return, they give you the credits. And those credits, as a community then, as an owner, you would syndicate. So you sell the credits and that money comes back and goes into your project. And there's a number of entities that can help you do that.
about 30% of your project.
Yeah, including my fees would be eligible, demolition costs, and then eligible new costs. Not all new costs are eligible, but most are if we do it the right way.
Yeah, when I was researching this, the event boards for the fire department would be,
Yeah,
so would that be another added expense onto it? I mean, that'd be close to
Yeah.
$1 million probably.
yeah. Utilizing that space as that conceptual design, yeah, it takes over that event bar,
Yeah.
that wing is the fire hall, which we need a 6-bay hall right now. That we don't have. So that'd be another.
It's time for new public safety
Thinking
building.
about doing.
Yeah.
At the same time, or potentially if you did something here, phasing that or, and getting that component done. I asked about the tax credits because I submitted for, state historical review for the CCFF construction grant that we had to go in, and essentially came back with, it'd be adversely affected, but that's, red flagged the CCCFF money, because it has to follow state preservation guidelines to access that grant money. So that grant that we were hoping for 562,000, could not be utilized at Pritchard. So we'd have to be used somewhere where we can follow essentially those guidelines. Anything that would be that tax credit eligible project would follow that. So that's coming due February 15th if we're gonna chase something down on that end, or potentially just, we don't get an application in. So that could be something to look at this space with that, or potentially the mayor's endeavor of tackling in a theater component. It would qualify for that with like the Reveille Theater and renovating that space. If we wanted to tackle that. We have until February 15th to get that approved and something out the door, at least an application out the door, if we want to try to access that grant money now without tossing it in with Pritchard. So we'll just it'll be a straight denial for that. So I already got confirmation of that.
Without thoroughly going through it, what would the seating capacity be? Pritchard.
Pritchard,
On one of the diagrams.
I thought I saw it earlier and I just,
Oh, maybe it doesn't. He used to have those figures.
yeah, so at Pritchard, we would be removing the permanent seating that's there now for
Right.
observation. And if you wanted to come back with floor seating for some sort of event, we did do a test fit. I don't know if
yeah, that's what I was looking at.
I might follow back up with you, because we did lay out tables in it. But I don't think it made the final report. I think it was
Are you
one of
talking for like an event,
Right,
not a wedding or something?
right,
You're talking like a sports event?
right.
oh,
Oh,
so we didn't test, I guess, let me clarify then. We looked at Pritchard, if the Armory doesn't happen, and you wanted to do round table events in it, like you do now, a wedding or some other thing. If you wanted to have spectators seating around the basketball or around the volleyball, we could lay out temporary bleachers. That's
Like the ones that fold up.
correct. That fold up, telescoping, or even, there's a lot of people that use the three, you've seen them in indoor facilities, 3 levels of seating. They don't go any higher, because if you get higher, you gotta do railings around them. They have little wheels on them. And yeah, we could place those there as well. I've actually even seen in some of these facilities, they allow people to kind of come in with their bag chairs for youth events, especially if you had, you practicing on 3 or 4 of those. Ideally, if this is all Fall City kids on a Saturday league, people drop them off and are on the running track, they're working out, they're using the facility during that time to offset or grabbing a cup of coffee. But if they want to watch it, we didn't plan permanent seating.
Yeah, you pretty well have to have temporary, just based upon the limited court space that you have.
we talked about kind of where the stage was. You might be able to put some kind of against that, though. It wouldn't be in abundance, but.
I mean, if you kind of think about a basketball court having 2 teams, 5 on the court from each team, maybe another 5, and you got 10, 20 kids, we can kind of do some math on what the maximum would be, and maybe it's not going to be a lot of seating.
Well, this isn't for that. We've got
Yes.
other places, and I don't foresee them ever coming back to auditorium. So it's possible, but
Well, they made a bid for it for district basketball tournaments and things like that, and district wrestling. In district wrestling,
Yeah.
you know, you're bringing in
Yeah.
10 schools, 10 or 12 schools, Fall City Public Wrestling, and fans come in, and sometimes you're going 2 hours and they're staying. Yeah, you need seating for 400 or 500 people.
It'd be different.
Bleacher style seating.
In this current concept, we have to rework it to do that. I compare it more to an elementary school gym for seating capacity. We could fit a few around the edges with its current configuration.
We haven't had district wrestling in a very, very long time, but they have made bids on it before, so.
I do think there's an option, again, putting back on my architect hat, where if some of the uses that we described on the top or the bottom, Plan East or Plan West, weren't essential, telescoping bleachers could be placed under the current new running track, right? And we could definitely take up 15 feet by the width of something, and we could have some bleachers if that was a concept. Absolutely. I always warn people, once we start putting bleachers in though, our plumbing counts go through the roof. Fire marshal, code officials, now, you guys are your own jurisdiction, so we could get by some of that maybe, by being reasonable, but about every 16 inches of bleacher is a occupant that multiplies time our plumbing codes, so we get some pretty large plumbing counts if we start holding spectators, and I hate to build things for 1 or 2 uses a year, right?
I get it.
And I'm not paying for them, and I know how to do it.
Thank you, Jay. This has been very well put together and
Yeah, really, really appreciate it. Really good.
Thanks for the opportunity, we enjoyed it. Olson couldn't be here tonight, but any questions about the engineering report studies, they apologize, they had a conflict tonight. But we'll get you information.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I covered? Doodle?
Under the regular business, discussion and action, establishing a recreational center steering committee.
So through the study and kind of the focus groups, we had a, I don't know, what, 15-member group, park boards, rec had somebody, schools all had somebody represented, Rotary Club. I know there's a few I'm forgetting off the top of my head, so I didn't write them all down. But we want to go to the next stage where, and Jay talked about that next phase, where we're like, okay, yeah, this is something we want to do. We actually want to look at going in to get some design drawings and that use. So we want to kind of have likely a steering committee or somebody that we can have these meetings with and get the design report back to council, or at the park board, or however that's going to be done. We don't have to establish that at this point in time, but we have a group that's been doing it so far. I think I would recommend kind of keeping that group, or at least those entities involved, because they'd all be stakeholders within the rec center components. I can bring that, data out, but I guess I wanted to get it out public and go to the next stage, how we want to do that, how we want to actually, I guess, get an official steering committee pulled together to take that to the next stage. So we just want to establish that. We don't need an action on it, but we want to discuss it, how you guys would potentially see something like that, or if it's something we want to do. Decision comes down to the governing body, we got the study data. We want to keep it as an item of discussion. We can just keep it as an item of discussion moving forward. And revisit at the.
Well, you've had these people on 8 different times or whatever I just read?
We had 4 public sessions through the study, and then the stakeholder groups kind of each had their own, I think we had 4 or 6 meetings for that. Might have been 8, actually, 6 or 8. And they were the ones that went through a lot of the touring, and went around to the other facilities, just kind of an impromptu one that we generated, or I generated based upon input from who may utilize a rec center.
Well, if those stakeholders, if those people have already been involved, and it's just continue with it. You've gotten this far, and if you can get a number of people, whatever you're requesting.
I think you want probably, you essentially could add some council on there if you wanted to have council input at the committee level. We didn't have much of that outside of what we did, besides our sessions that we had for the city side of things. Just how you guys want to potentially see that structure. Whether you want governing body on there or not.
Well, we talked about it, putting a study in with the utility bills so the public can give us an idea on which way to go, you know, or to go even.
Now, have you been much public, or anything back to you or anything on this? 'Cause I
We got-
got hit up a lot.
We got quite a bit out of at the study time, with our sessions, more than I thought we would gain. We got more with the stakeholder kind of group, but other than that, I got a few here and there. This is the first time really this is out fully public. Try to get some of those conversations had, but council members got data coming to them, I'd say, have them get in with this committee. If they're reporting back or have somebody that I can flow through, not flow through me, you know, I don't sit on the committee, but I would be there to facilitate that committee component.
So as we're going back through here again on this here, we were on the 13 million, that was for the city hall and the auditorium, am I correct? So now if we look
Yeah.
at, we're not getting a grant for the auditorium now, because that's.
Correct. Not, at least not the CCCFF grant.
So we take that out, and then if we do the, city hall, we still gotta replace the fire department too. So,
We have the land for that.
huh?
We already have the land.
We still got a building and water
Yeah.
lines, and that. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, still added expenses all the way through, yeah.
That's true.
I think that can be part of the committee's responsibility with
Mhm.
Anthony and everybody's guidance is to find more grant opportunities, find how we're gonna finance it if we do this.
But I think the steering committee, this shouldn't lose any steam. I think we just keep rolling. This has been a lot of work and you guys been at it since August and very thorough. I'm in favor of you putting a steering committee together, of those interested who are positive and want to see this off the ground.
I reached out to the stakeholder group that we had, none did one off of it. A few of them had the other person, or they'd send the next person if that person was gone. But we could essentially then just develop, saying, hey, you know, Falls City Public Schools has X seats on it, or Sacred Heart has X seats, the
Hospital.
park board, the hospital, Rotary, all those kind of whatever seats, and if they got somebody, they can just drop them in there, you know.
We're talking about 10 or 12 people maybe.
I would imagine. I'd imagine you're talking about, yeah.
I'd say we do it. I'd say you put together a steering, I mean, take time to get names. Is that what you want to do or?
Yeah, I'd say we'll probably talk to this group, just make sure, I can reach out to them. And then I can kind of come back with how that could potentially be formed, and I'll just write up a report for maybe the next meeting. So here's a committee and what those kind of duties would, what their objectives would be.
Do you need that in form of a motion to keep going, to establish, like a motion that okay the city administrator to put together names for a steering committee?
Yeah, we
Would
can just,
would that require our approval then, I suppose?
I would say let's
It would be
Let's
more
take a motion
transparent,
on
wouldn't
it,
it?
so
Yeah,
it's
it'd
a
be
little
more
more
transparent. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Vote.
7 yeas.
Number 3, discussion. Falls City Edge quarterly report, January 2024, Lucas Freshman.
So Lucas Fresho, Full City Edge, this is a quarterly report. Just talking on the seating at Pritchard, right now max capacity is 2,000. If you took out the seats and you added 6-person round tables just on the floor, it would come to 616 people. I'm sorry, 420 people. If you did row seating to try to maximize the space, it'd be 616. That was one of the numbers that they came up in the previous study. Okay, just run through this real quick here. This Project Meadowlark, just sharing this with you. It's the state of Nebraska sent us a potential proposal. We filled it out for sustainable aviation fuel. They need 50 megawatts along the Union Pacific line. The reason that this market is interesting is that they need 190 megawatts of power, upwards of 345 megawatts by 2028, and we've got about 1 to 2. So the reason that this is interesting, and the reason that we're, I guess, in the game is that this type of power doesn't really exist in a lot of places. And so a developer looking to do a $500 million investment for a project like this might have to build their own generation. It's just 20 jobs, something that we could maintain here, and provide. And, we're just trying to just throw darts, try to get some looks. A project like this could help our power resilience. We also filled out a LEAP grant, the Department of Energy's LEAP grant. The federal government recognizes Falls City as an energy burden community. And so there could be potential for $50,000 of technical assistance to help us with some of our energy burden, to possibly design systems that we could potentially use to go after that 15 million that the legislature set aside. Also another grant that we're applying for, USDA Rural Business Development Grant, to study the area's biomass for feedstock supply like corn stovers. It's just a sales tool that we might be able to use to help attract something like a sustainable aviation fuel, or some of those investments in the community. Doing some more marketing on other development projects. We've attended some shows. We also hosted 10 staff from the state of Nebraska in October. It's really just a chance for us to showcase Falls City, show them what we got. Some of those connections then lead to them sending us potential projects. They know that we have some sites available. They know what our issues are on power. And it was just it was a good kind of 2-hour session where we took them around on a bus and just show them Falls City. Still having discussions for, the electrical infrastructure, trying to put together a proposal for the Board of Public Works to look at here in the future. We're at the EDGE board meeting tomorrow. I'm looking to get approval to execute a contract with Midwest Engineering for a 30% design layout at North Commercial Corridor. This is just continuing the infrastructure development of that site. The funding for that was approved back in September of 21. And that's the LB 840 funds. There's $151,000 in there. Falls City Area Properties, a subsidiary of EDGE, has acquired all the assets and liabilities of Falls City Industrial Distribution Corporation. They have dissolved. Southeast Nebraska Land Bank has formed. We've elected officers, committees. We've had about 3 meetings. We've signed 2 purchase agreements on a couple properties. One of those we're looking to buy for $1. So this is what this thing is designed for, is to try to get these properties that are burdened to the people that own them, and then access that $25 that you guys set aside for the demo fund. Try to beautify these neighborhoods in the middle of town. Hosted Manufacturing Day in October. It was our best attended yet. Had really good participation in the industrial park. Thankful for that. Continuing to look at ways that we can serve the community for childcare. It's quite the issue. Also joining and teaming up with the folks in Auburn at ESU4. Some of these discussions on Perkins grants and workforce development for our high schoolers will come in handy. You've seen the recent partnership between SCC and Falls City Public Schools. Attended a Bio Nebraska annual meeting, just trying to network with some of those folks that are in those emerging markets in agriculture. Attended a career day, really emphasizing the trades for these high school kids. And we started a community childcare fund, working on some parameters so that we can help build capacity in the community. Parameters for that aren't quite outlined. Working on scheduling a housing board meeting so that we can utilize these rural workforce housing funds that you guys have allotted. And the EDGE annual report will appear in the journal this week. That's all I got.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you.
Jay, feel free to bump out if you want to.
Thank you again.
For discussion and action, authorize execution of professional service agreement with Southeast Nebraska Development District for the 2023 Downtown Revitalization Grant Project.
We just got released the grant contract for DTR, the 3rd phase. We got that all executed. Essentially, Send does that administration component for us and guides us through that. This is their contract to do that work. That was what was allocated within the budget for that grant. I don't remember what the total was for them, like 35,000 or so, if I remember right. It has it in there somewhere.
25.
Is it 25?
Yeah.
essentially, we just need to get it executed. The next stage would be, we have a downtown revitalization plan. Within that has a committee component. We then start advertising for the architect, engineer, or really it will be a civil engineer to look at the streetscape, the city sidewalk, and which the committee would then need to choose which block downtown we want to potentially do, or potentially we can get multiple blocks with funding. Going south, 15th would be the next one, or going north would be, 1800 block. That committee would need to make those decisions and get those recommendations back to council once they got to that stage. This would get sent in place. We cannot do any contracting, any advertising, anything done until that's grant is signed, that contract is signed, and we have sent under contract, then we can actually move into that next step. Any questions with that? Kind of rinse and repeat from the
Motion to approve.
Second.
Vote.
7 yeas.
Discussion and action. Request to rent Pritchard Auditorium and to allow alcohol to be served on February 24th, 2024 on the Fall City JC Wrestling event.
Another SDL or an approval for the SDL?
Motion to approve.
Vote.
7 yeas.
6, discussion and action. Review the draft interlocal agreement for energy and emergency and non-emergency dispatching services for Richardson County.
All right, after the commissioners meeting, was it 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago? The commissioners passed the resolution to end their contract or not renew their contract with Beatrice and entertain a contract or a joint resolution in a local agreement with the city through their dispatching services. Originally, they were mainly talking about just doing an emergency 911 only. When we had our first discussions, that is migrated into full dispatching to meet their needs, which is what Beatrice is essentially doing for the county now. So we have an agreement here in place, or not in place, excuse me, a draft agreement to submit to Richardson County, showing how we could accommodate that and get that done. It would require additional dispatchers positions. Right now, we run a rotation of 6 on dispatch. We would essentially need 8 to get that done based upon the volume. That allows us to have 2 dispatchers on call each time for dual dispatching to handle, the city's needs plus the county needs to handle, and emergency 911 at the same time. So our contract is very similar to what Beatrice had. Beatrice actually submitted theirs to us so we could take a review of what they had, which is public record anyways. So we kind of went through that, modified it to accommodate how we operate, and then send it over to Richardson County to, I guess, look at it, see if it meets their needs, and talk through that. Some key components within that, if you look through where the fees and stuff are set up, we have a kind of built in to say, hey, we're gonna have to hire 2 dispatchers for the dual dispatching, and asking the county to pay for the salary of that time to get those people on board, which wouldn't be in your current budget cycle. It takes usually around 6 months to get a dispatcher up to, through the internal training components that we have. So, August 1 is when the county comes out of their contract. So essentially we would need to get dispatchers in place, get them going through training so they could be live, ready to go August 1. So it has a little caveat in there for a fee to accommodate the cost of that. And then the actual cost for the services would all run through our Fund 205, which is our emergency 911 and dispatchers have their own fund. Reviewing the budgets, you have our wireless funds that come in that offset the PSAP itself. And then you have wireless funds off occupational taxes that fund that. So the essential agreement verbally agreed to was kind of a 50% split. So it takes 8 staff, it takes all the resources to do that, and then we have components that are, lumen, our phone lines, everything that ties in with that. We've got some hard costs that go through that fund, and it goes solely through that. So essentially, we would get those costs on a monthly basis, bill Richardson County, and then to pay that. Their current contract with Beatrice was like a quarterly payment, X fee, X dollars per quarter. I didn't see a real way of getting that done. Those prices will fluctuate based upon our personnel. And get the best cost savings for both entities was just to kind of flat split that and then just divide it out into a billing rate. We'll have an idea of what that is because we're going to go through budgets. So county budget and city budget will have that data. We'll know what that is when we come down to that budget cycle, but that'll give us an idea of where it's going to be at as far as cost wise.
So really, this could kind of save us money in the long run because we're paying for, instead of 6 dispatchers, we'd be splitting the cost of 8, so we're paying for 4.
Yes. It's kind of it's a win-win. It's a win-win, quite frankly, for the citizens if we get an agreement put together. It's going to get faster, faster calls, better coordination. Won't be transferring stuff all over the place. This resolution this agreement does create a committee within that, an advisory committee. So anybody or any entity that gets dispatched would have a voice to then come back to the governing body and say, whatever procedures and policies that are in place, if there need to be a revision. So, volunteer fire would have a spot, rural fire would have a spot, ambulance crew, the county, you'd have a city person on there also. So you'd have this advisory committee that would be generated to try to patch out those issues and deal with those policies and procedures.
This would be a savings for all taxpayers, not just city.
Yeah.
Be saving money.
Here's a couple what if. Term begins August 1st and renews annually. And if the county wants out, 180-day notice, 6-month notice that they're going to change directions. In the meantime, I know it takes some time if we do hire 2 new people, 2 new dispatchers. So we do split the cost. And so here goes the what ifs. We've been down this road before. County changes their mind in 2 years and decides that they want to do it on their own. We go through the same thing we just went through the last 10 or 12 years. We got this contract. They give us a 6 months notice. We've got 8 people here and they're city employees and all of a sudden we don't need input. Then we've got cutting jobs again. So here we go again. I think this is, I like how the language, but personally, I don't like that they can just quit again, like they did last time, and leave us holding. And here we're creating 2 new jobs, even though they're sharing the expense. But if they decide to leave this contract with the city of Falls City and try and do something with Richardson County, which they've tried to do off and on for years, then we're cutting jobs. And that's one of the reasons we didn't do this to begin with, was because we're not in the job cutting business. And I would like to see some language that this contract was longer than right now. It could be 6 months. They can actually sign on August 1st and 6 months later, they can say, hey, we're going to get out in 6 months. Now you got 2 trained employees and a bunch of expenses. And even though they absorb some of that, who's going to lay 2 people off? Are we going to go through this again? And I've sat in on meetings too, and I've gone to a few things, and this is something we haven't worked out for a very, very long time. But if the city of Falls City has been, we were underfunded by the county for years. They pulled funding and they wanted to do it themselves, and we continued, the citizens of Falls City continued to pick up, and we had 911, reliable 911, until they go to Beatrice. And that didn't work out. Now they're coming back. This is not a direct shot at the county, but this is what's involved in this contract, is you got 2 entities sharing the expenses. But we absorbed a lot of expense for a long time and provided for the entire county. because of some of the glitches with their agreement with Beatrice, we end up taking rural fire. And I think Burton, didn't they come back and they got on our PSAP too? Are we directing 911, Burton Fire?
We always,
We always did?
we always have.
Okay. My point is, you can sign this contract and 6 months later, they can say, we're done. I
How
would
long
rather
a contract would you like?
I would agree with that. I would like to see, what I would really like to see is like a 5-year or something that sets some time, because the discussions that did happen prior to, there was a lot of, I'll say it, there was a lot of like conversation that happened like out of spite for the city. And a lot of like somebody would say one thing and then vote another way. So I do think that just because of the history and because of the fact that it would be such a joint effort and where there would be 2 people who would potentially be laid off, and because of the history with this agreement in the past, I would like to see something where this would be a minimum 5-year that protects from, you know, any elections on the county side or elections on the city side where like, you know, 3 new people are, you know, decided that they need to, you know, overhaul something. But I do like the idea of, or like the notion of having that committee, so that like concerns hopefully are, addressed like in a group effort and like some like advisory capacity before anything is done like that. But yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, I would really like to see, or obviously you have to have something in the agreement where there's termination, but if it's, you know, I would really like to see something where it's a 5-year minimum, you know, because it's just back and forth with whatever governing body feels like that year. So,
You could build it into the term, right now, just as it's 1-year automatic renewal. You'd have to tie something in saying, you know, it's 5 years guaranteed or some
like a 5-year
component of,
commitment, yeah.
yeah, or some component of a penalty upon termination to try to offset the additional expense that we.
I look at our best interest because of the investment. We'll have upgrades in the next couple of years, but I was at the county meeting when Beatrice came back and they're like, wait a minute, you're gonna terminate? We've spent some money, we've hired some people, we're budgeting our contract and we're doing our budgets. We are budgeting according to some of the contracts they had with Richardson County, and you go pulling that funding and they gave them their 6 months notice and they're like, well, we got people hired. We've upgraded our facility, we've upgraded our communications, we're depending on this income to help run this, and now all of a sudden you're pulling that out of there. We've done this before, a couple times. And I would just rather see something that secures the city of Falls City so we don't go back to this again, because like I said, we've spent a lot of money over the years keeping this going without any assistance from the county, and if they haven't, and sent a lot of Richardson County money to Beatrice, and that didn't work. And I agree that it should be, if we do this, it should be like a 5-year, so it's not a political thing that every 2 years we are changing half this council, and every 2 years they're changing at least 1 or 2 commissioners. Somebody comes in with a different agenda and they say, let's break up. Let's just give them 6 months notice and go on. I don't think.
About a 5-year with a renewable 5-year, but they have to give a 1-year notice instead of 6 months.
Well, not to be political, if some of us aren't here in the next couple of years, then I don't want to stick other councils, but I agree that I think we should go through one huge election cycle, a 4-year period. So I agree with what Kaylee says. I think we should do a 5-year minimum and then renew it every year after that. You could, you know.
I think not having that too would be, you know, if we have people who are applying for dispatch positions and maybe people who are familiar with the history of this and how it's been rocky, like nobody wants to apply for a job, but if they're like, okay, well, if the county gets grumpy about something, then I won't have a job. Like that's, people want the stability of knowing that like that position's gonna be open for them.
I think we owe it to everybody to do that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, and even having consistency among dispatchers is really, really critical to the emergency services, like knowing who your dispatcher is, Like, I recognize all of the voices of every single dispatcher in the county. Like, I recognize the voices. I know that they know what they're doing. And just having that consistency is really key to having the most effective emergency response to anything, because that's really the core of this is it is 911 specifically, like emergency response. I think that when you have a tumultuous relationship or just the threat of the political stuff, if you politicize something like that, it gets rocky and it's not worth it. So I would really like to see some language that way for, again, job stability for the dispatchers that we hire, and just to make sure that it's not something where public safety is politicized.
I like the longer term, but as we went through this in the past, I mean, we had one point where the county commissioner said, we're just gonna take it from you guys. We're gonna do it, give us the equipment, we're gonna do it. Like, they tried to bully us on this thing. That didn't go as planned, that's when they broke off. I think we tried to go something longer, but honestly, I think we need to, I guess, talk to them and see how long they're gonna go, because if we go bold up and say, we want 5 years, they're gonna say, no way in heck. And I mean, we're gonna have to work something out. I just feel that and the commissioners are great, but we can't strong arm them. I know they need us, but I don't wanna go through this step again. And whether it be somewhat longer or 5 years, or we work something out that, hey, if you guys decide to leave again, you have to pay whoever we have to lay off 6 months severance. I don't know, but I don't, as much as I'd like to dictate the terms, we're gonna have two big egos going back and forth on this thing, and nothing's gonna get done. There's gonna be more hurt feelings between the city and the county, and we can't do that. I just think we need to talk with them. I mean, I don't, as much as I wanna say 5 years or go back to the actress, it's not gonna be a possibility. I think we need
Is there
to.
any certain time the contract can be signed right away or not, or?
Has to be agreed by August 24 or August this year.
Well, and ideally, it's gonna like to be agreed way before that.
Well, yeah, you gotta hire a couple of employees.
Yeah.
I had additional conversation with John Cavarzaghi, after our meeting, kind of getting data over to look at kind of timeline and say, it's gonna takes that 6 months. We gotta get staff in. We got another item after this talking about how to do that and get that completed and job advertisement brought in. He understands that commitment from the conversations I had with him. But it would need to be happening way before August 1, so we'd be looking at trying to get an agreement probably finalized for the end of February, potentially is what they're hoping.
Well, going back to what I just believe that a longer term commitment, if we're all committed, then nobody should have a problem with a 5 year, 3 year, whatever it is. But I believe, like she said, is non-political. It's just 5 years, you go through your election cycle and it doesn't, and if you got it on that 5 years, you've got 5 years to find your way out of it if they want out of it, and it's working at a 50-50 split, which it is right now. I have no problem with the verbiage besides, I think we need to have some longevity to it, so we have security, so if we decide to hire 2 more people, they know they're gonna be working for us for at least 5 years, and if not longer.
That was part of the reason why the draft for tonight is we wanted to get input on anything else that you feel that need to be changed on it. So we can go forward with the.
Didn't you say that they can't take 911?
They cannot.
They cannot. So the worst that could happen is they could take the regular dispatches and move it to the county themselves.
They can dispatch themselves.
That they could do that down the road.
But never 911, right?
No, we are the key staff in this area.
I guess, I mean, I know we need to have an action here, but I mean, can we maybe in this action, I mean, I'd like to appoint Don Ferguson to go in to talk about this, because I know he's firsthand been at every commissioner meeting discussing this, because I went to talk about it, he's like, I know, and he's been there. I think he has a good relationship with some of those commissioners. I mean, I guess I'd like to propose that, with Anthony, Don go with him and try to hammer out some details.
Throw Chief Maker's name in there.
Yeah. Not you,
Well, essentially, this, like I said, is a draft.
It is.
It's gonna have to go, I've already went through Dunn's office, through the legal side. There's a few things that, there's like a dispute resolution component within the agreement that I could want to add something in. It's gonna need to go to Sam. to get her review on the county side, and then obviously the commissioners themselves. There's not really a lot of discussion outside of that. You gotta do each commissioner by themselves, because they're a quorum of two.
Right.
So you gotta kind of flow through that to get that done, but I think it's gonna go through a couple stages here for sure on drafts. Kind of the intent was get that over to the county, have them give us some yays or nays that they would potentially have, or things they would like to see. We can bring that back again. We just kind of keep it as an old business item until we come to an agreement. And ideally, like I said, they're looking to try to fast track it and get it done prior to March, so we could get it actually.
So if they agree with everything we got, all we're asking is more of a commitment. That's all.
I think you can take the feedback you were given, voice those concerns,
That's right.
and then
You don't need
Bring
to
us
do
back
that.
an
You could-
updated draft
You could
after
just
you
put
speak to
that in on, term, and where it says this agreement shall automatically renew, but I believe that this is a 5-year term. That's what I would like to see on there. And I'm not bullying anybody, I just don't want to go through this again 2 years from now.
No, I'm not saying that. I
Yeah,
just
I
don't want
know.
them to perceive it. as-
Well, but it's not, and I understand where you're coming from, I'm not. It's just I've been around this for a long time, and we've gone back and forth so many times, and now is the time to just say, hey, guys, let's just do this and move on this is all a safety issue. This is not a political issue, this isn't a budgetary issue, this is a safety issue. So, don't throw numbers out that every 911 call costs $8,000, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
It's not a piecemeal, and we're not charging by that, and, if we only get one 911 call in 365 days, and somebody's doing something right, and that means there wasn't any emergencies or any life threats, so we don't do that, and that's the numbers that were thrown out at a commissioners meeting. It's like, this isn't about money, we're doing a 50-50 split, which is the way it was before. I just feel that if we want to do this, and let's work together, then let's work together for 5 years.
Yeah, because I wasn't around, but the last time, they're the one that's kind of dumped on us, not us.
That's correct.
Is that what happened? So would we protect ourselves with something? I think it's.
We
good.
continue to offer good quality service, 911 response within the city of Falls City. And when we plan on doing so. But like I said, we've got another agenda item coming, and that's sort of how I'm protecting that a little bit. But anyway, we're going to need it. One more time.
So what we could do is, like the Dunn's office does want to add a dispute resolution. They didn't have the language pulled together with that. 'Cause this came up fairly quick to kind of get some of this finalized in their review. So I wanted to get a preliminary from them before it came to council. So we do have a dispute resolution component that we want to add in. We could track the changes of that based upon this draft being the current one. Track those changes on the documents for that getting added in. We could also add in language for a minimum 5-year with 1 year annually after that. Submit that and then go to that next stage, have those discussions.
Chief Baker, do you agree with some of what?
We talked about this before, this was just something quick though.
I understand.
To get before the council and for the longevity, because it's gonna be an investment for the entire county, not just Falls City or Rich, it's the entire county. And the more we work together with it, and I think the longevity part of it is working together, we can keep our PSAP in our county. So I would like to see it longer too. I don't know what their view is on it though.
All we can do is be open to the discussion, bring it up to them and.
Well, if we say 5, they come back at 3, maybe we can live with it. If we say 3, they'll come back at 2, so.
All this is on public record, so they're gonna hear what we're saying.
That's great. That's great. I've heard what they had to say, and we're going back and forth, but this back and forth has gone on too long.
You
And
think
so
they're
we're at
right?
this point now that it's just a matter of a commitment. All I'm asking for is a 5-year commitment, so we can just, not every time a different sheriff comes in and has different ideas, and that's political too. And I believe Hardesty just got in, and that's great. We've got a 4-year sheriff. I know that he's willing to work with this. Let's just make it work. But I think we owe it to our citizens in our community to have continuity and something a little bit more concrete, and it doesn't always flop around every time you change county commissioners or change city council. That's just the way I look at it.
Do we need a motion like that?
I think, just for clarity, that if we wanna submit something to the county, I think we have some sort of motion. We've got a draft, let's take it to the next stage. I mean, I don't wanna really just submit that on my behalf. It's the governing body's decision when it comes down to that. So I'd say, entertain a motion to recommend submittal of the draft agreement with revisions to the terms and the dispute resolution. We track those changes, submit that.
I'd make that motion.
How many years we going, 5?
I would put it at, yeah, we'll change the term to read up to 5, and I'll talk to Doug's office about how we can get that
With evergreen renewal,
in there. What's that?
with the evergreen renewal clause.
We had a first from Katie,
Second,
second from Ferguson.
all vote.
7 yeas.
We're still doing 7 then, or we gotta wait?
Yeah, no, let's.
Discussion and action. Authorization to advertise for a total of 2 additional dispatcher job openings contingent with the interlocal agreement with Richardson County for dispatch service.
So, like I said before, the timeline of that to get this accomplished, and for Conversation Kawasaki, they're aware of the same thing. Told them we're gonna have this item come before council to at least get approval, say, hey, we need to bring on the 2, let's get it advertised, so we don't hang ourselves up on that timeline to get that done, and that could take anywhere 2 to 4 weeks to get the advertisements done. That does go through the police hiring committee for dispatchers also, so once we get those, that goes through that committee, and then comes back before council for the complete hiring of those. So there's a little bit of process to get done. I think we could probably have the advertisement out while we're getting through the negotiation piece, and contingent upon the finalized interlocal agreements, then we could have it hired.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All vote.
Seven yeas?
Ray, discussion and action, award of the 2023 street improvement phase 1 to Contractors Inc. as recommended by the Board of Public Works, Trevor Campbell.
Good evening, council. I'm Trevor Campbell, the new Board of Public Works Director, or say Board of Public Works. Board of Public Works hired me as the Public Works Director for town back in August, first time in front of you guys. With these 2 action items, first one's this street improvements project. We have capital funding slated for some street improvements. Olson and Associates was hired to do a condition pavement assessment that was taking place prior to me being brought on board. But that project is out to bid and slated for construction this summer, pending your guys' motion here tonight. The contract is proposed to contractors. They're the contractor doing the pavement work out on Highway 73, I believe some on 75 north of town. They were the only bid. This is the best price you're probably gonna get from a asphalt contractor, considering their proximity. They have a pavement, batch plant out there already, so it's fairly close to town, but the award is in the amount of $760,000, $900,014. So if you guys have any questions regarding that project.
This would be
So, yeah, I guess
14th Street from, was it Abbott or Crook?
Krug,
From
14th.
Crook up to Stone
up
as
to, yeah,
asphalt overlay. And then from Stone to Harlan, that's all new pavement, taking out the brick. And then there's another section of overlay on 25th Street, and then patchwork throughout Fulton, and some overlay on Fulton from, what was it, 17, 18?
Yeah, 18th on south
Yeah.
to 14th.
Yeah.
Dire need of that. That's
It doesn't go all the way, there's a patchwork at 14th to 16th, and then it picks up at 16th to 19th, I believe, for that overlay work with, the next phase is is whatever we want to do after that, but this is get your first stage of something done.
There's a chunk, there's 2 blocks over on 25th Street from Abbott to Crook.
Fair, correct.
Fairly correct. That was identified as well, that goes down to Stan's Lake. But those are the 2, 14th Street, 25th are the 2 big items. There's a little bit on Bolton and a bunch of miscellaneous patching throughout town. Anthony said this is phase 1 to many that need to happen in town if anyone has driven our street before. So there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them.
We had like 10 million is what came out of the street study to get done. So,
Start somewhere and chip away at it and
That's
pick
right.
the priority
It's gonna be a
areas.
while since we've got anything.
yeah, well, we're also trying to prioritize it. One of the reasons of having this go back to Board of Public Works is our other utility infrastructure. So part of selecting kind of what we have here is we know what's in the ground there. We have a few issues that we've got to deal with prior to this project going in place. But we know we don't have a problem with most of that that's in this project. We shouldn't have to deal with that.
Last thing you want to do is put a new street in and have to replace the water valve or.
Yeah.
So, those talks are occurring.
When's phase 2?
Pardon?
What's that? I was gonna say, don't forget.
Come on, we
my
need to plan
street.
ahead.
Oh, you're saying-
We need to plan ahead.
That was actually budgeted in here. I mean, if you look at it.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Well, vote.
All right, who we have a second? Amber?
Yeah.
All right, 7 yeas.
Number 9, authorization to execute proposal with Ferris Engineering for the ARC flash study as recommended by the Board of Public Works. Trevor, again.
So, another item that the board approved for recommendation, this item's an arc flash study that Ferris Engineering would perform. I made contact with Ferris Engineering through Auburn. Had them come down and kind of do a quick walkthrough of our power plant. I had some concerns with safety at our power plant, and obviously electrical's on the top of the list down there. Among numerous things that need to be addressed down there, to me, the safety's foremost down there. The arc flash study is not a requirement because we're government, but it doesn't mean that we don't have obligation to our employees to perform studies like this on the behalf of our employees and put the right information in front of them, identify the hazards. I mean, we have 4 new employees down there that I guarantee you they don't know what arc flash study means or what the purpose of it, which is concerning, and I don't know that our guys that have been down there for years would know either. And there's high voltage, low voltage and high voltage equipment down there that you just walk by that could kill someone, and you wanna, it's easy to say that, yeah, that'll kill you, but you go through and there's a process of identifying those hazards and how you identify them. I mean, it's per OSHA standards, NFPA, the IEE, which is the International Electric and Electronics Engineers. Really, the very last page of what Ferris provided kind of outlines the necessity of this study. But like I say, I mean, really, it comes down to identifying the safety hazards and noting them for our employees down there. And then what it will do is generate more projects. They're gonna identify hazards that need to be addressed. I mean, that facility's 70 years old and it was added onto and added onto and added onto and added onto. So to me, this is one of, among many things that need to happen down there, this is priority, because to add to this, the Board of Public Works decided, on my recommendation and discussion with Anthony and, there's issues down there with the the units not running when we always need them to. And Part of that is because they sit for months, sometimes over a year at a time. Their engines, they need to run, they need to be cycled. Well, you're gonna create exposure, more exposure than our employees are accustomed to. And the last thing I want is anyone to get hurt because of complacency and they didn't know any different. So I don't know if you guys have any questions, but that's kind of in a nutshell. I had Ferris put together some literature here for you guys to skim through if you had wanted more detail, but
Appreciate you taking the initiative.
Yeah, bringing it to us.
Keep everyone safe.
That's like a really good thing about like new leadership is you have a fresh set of eyes on things and like being able to.
this was my very first question when I got here.
Yeah.
And then no one even knew what ArcFlash study was, and even if there had been one, and it's something you need to perform, at least probably every 10 years, and how many times that plan's been added onto, I mean, it's necessary, beyond necessary.
Make a motion to approve. I'll second.
Vote.
7 yeas?
Yeah, that is the agenda.
I didn't want my